Shalom. We are continuing in the Gospel according to Matthew. We are looking at the Hebraic background. Today we enter chapter 10, and we will be discussing the names of the disciples. Matthew 10, 1 through 4. And when he called upon him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out, and to heal all manner of sicknesses and all manner of disease. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these: the first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the publican, James the son of Alphaeus, and Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. In looking across the Gospels, we see that the lists are similar, overlapping, but not all exactly the same. So we're going to look at all these names one by one and why they appear the way they do across the Gospels. Now, there are a few things that happen in transliteration, in other words, translating one language, or more specifically, one alphabet to another. And one thing that happens, if we look at the older texts, we see that there are many names that end in S. Moses, Judas, Elias, blah, blah, blah. Yes, and including Jesus. So this is a problem of Greek grammar, that masculine nouns, which are used as the subject of a sentence, always end in S. And that is why you see an S on all these names. It is something that came into particularly the Old Testament, which is written in Hebrew, where the names received an extra S. So we're going to see this often. I'm not going to discuss it again. It's a Greek grammar issue. In other words, clearly we know that Moses' name in Hebrew is Moshe. There's no S on it. Judah's name is Yehudah. There's no S on it. The other very common problem involves the letter J. And there are many, many names here that you see that begin with a J. There's no J sound in Hebrew. That sound is always Y, and it's represented by the letter Yod. The letter J came into use in medieval Latin. It's called a swash letter, or a kind of a fancy letter. It's indicative of something special. So if you had a Roman numeral that ended in III, then they would change the last I to the J, to the swash, so that you knew you were in the end of something. It didn't have any special sound until this Italian author who lived between 1478 and 1550 was the first to explicitly distinguish the I and J as separate sounds. And there are J sounds in English, of course, in French, and so we begin to see it being used here in the 15th century. All those names in that list that start with J should start with a Y, with a Y sound. So the first on the list in Matthew is Simon Peter, who is also named Kepha. So Kepha comes being spelled with a C as a result of the Latin translation, but it's not Cephas, it's K with a K sound, Kephas, as it is written in the Greek. It comes from an Aramaic word meaning like a cave inside a rock. The word is kaf. It's used in Job 30 verse 6 to dwell in the clefts of the valleys, in the caves of the earth, and in the rocks. So somewhere inside there's a hollow place for someone to enter. Peter received this name from Yeshua specifically, and we can read about that in John 1:42. And he brought him to Yeshua. And when Yeshua beheld him, he said, "You are Simon, the son of Jonah. You shall be called Kephas, which is by interpretation a stone." The Greek word for stone is something to do with Petros, and perhaps you know some English cognate words. For example, the word petroglyph is a marking that's made in a stone. Now he is called Bar Jonah or Bar Yonah, and Jonah is the name of a prophet. And there are three things that attach these two figures, Simon and Jonah, together. First of all, the city of Jaffa or Yaffo, we read about in Jonah 1:3. But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of Jehovah. And he went down to Jaffa, or Yaffo, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare thereof, and went out into it to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of Jehovah. And we find Peter also in the same city in Acts 10:32. Send therefore to Jaffa, and call hither Simon, whose surname is Peter. He is lodged in the house of one Simon a tanner by the sea, who, when he comes, shall speak unto you. Both of these men are guilty of a severe denial, which causes them remorse. Jonah 2:1-2. Then Jonah prayed unto Jehovah his God out of the fish's belly, and said, I cried by reason of my affliction unto Yahweh. And he heard me. Out of the belly of Sheol cried I, and you heard my voice. Because he had denied the task that the Lord had given him, and he ran away, and now he is being afflicted from the belly of the fish. And of course Peter, in Matthew 26, remembered the word of Yeshua, which said unto him, Before the cock crows, you shall deny me thrice. This did in fact happen, and Peter went out and wept bitterly. And finally, they are both responsible for bringing the good news to the Gentiles. Jonah does finally go to Nineveh, and the people received the word, and they believed God, and proclaimed a fast, and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them even to the least of them. For word came unto the king of Nineveh, and he rose from his throne, and he laid his robe from him, and covered him with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. And God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, and God repented of the evil that he had said that he would do unto them, and he did not do it. And of course, in the previous scene, while Peter is in Jaffa, he goes to Cornelius's house, and he brings them the good news, and then he brings the results of that meeting back to the council, and he reports in Acts 11, And as I began to speak, the Holy Spirit fell on them, as on us at the beginning. Then I remembered the word of the Lord, how that he said, John indeed baptized with water, but you shall be baptized with the Holy Spirit. For as much then as God gave them the like gift as he did unto us, who believed on the Lord Yeshua, the Messiah, what was I that I could withstand God? And so both groups have received the good news at the hand of each of these men. The second person mentioned is Andrew. He's Peter's brother. His name is a Greek name and can mean either man or husband. And primarily what we see is that almost every time he's mentioned as Peter's brother. Next we have the sons of Zebedee. First James, and also their sobriquet, son of thunder. The first thing we want to look at is how the name Jacob became James, because this is how it's always translated. And there is a myth that this is the reason that King James requisitioned the Bible in 1611 so that his name could be in it, but that's just not true. When we see the Greek translation, we see that it is Iakavos. Remember, we talked about the S's always being at the end. When it comes into Latin, it maintains the same consonants. By the time it gets to Tyndale in 1526, we see that there's no J, but it's being spelled I-A-M-E-S, like Yames or Yamis. I'm not even sure how it would be pronounced. And that comes all the way through the Geneva Bible and some printings of the King James. After 1611, it is spelt with the J, James. I have read that what happened in the later Latin, is the B sound reverts to an M sound, and these two sounds are related. You can definitely see it in an Italian translation from 1649 where it becomes Giacomo with an M instead of a B sound. Zebedee was their father, and this is a name which appears other places in the Old Testament as Zabdi. It comes from a Hebrew word meaning endowment or dowry. We see it in, for example, Joshua 7:18. And he brought his household man by man, and Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah, was taken when Achan took the forbidden Babylonian garment. Now the name Sons of Thunder was given to these two brothers by Yeshua, and presumably it is some form of a Hebrew or Aramaic word. In Hebrew it's written Bo, perhaps pronounced something like Ba'anergis, I don't know. Presumably made up of two pieces. The Ben we can see is the sons of thunder, And then the other Hebrew word is either ragaz or regesh. Both of these words have a feeling of tumult, even anger, or the crowd is tumultuous. We find them, Mark himself translates the word for us in 3:17. And James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, he, that is Yeshua, surnamed them Boanerges, which is the sons of thunder. Thunder in Greek is vorontis, and it has nothing to do with the nickname. Regesh here in Psalm 55:14 is translated company. We took sweet counsel together and walked unto the house of God in company. We have a picture of people going up to worship together at the temple, but there would be some excitement in that. Regaz is translated as insurrection in Psalm 64:2. Hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked, from the insurrection of the workers' iniquity. Thunder in the sense of tumultuousness. Now there are many Johns in the Bible, many forms of the name. It can be Yonatan or Yehonatan. Usually when talking about Saul's son, it says Yonatan, which means God has given. We see another form in Nehemiah 12:18 of Bilgah, Shemua of Shemaiah, Yehonatan. So either it's Yah, Natan, Yahweh is giving, or the longer form of Yah with Yeho, Natan, is giving. There's also a Yochanan, which means God is gracious, and we find that in 1 Chronicles 3:15. And the sons of Josiah were the firstborn Yochanan, the second Jehoiakim, the third Zedekiah, and the fourth Shallum. So as we said, it's going to start with a Y sound. If someone just writes John, it's hard to tell. Is it John, John, or Jonathan, a shortcut? Next we see Philip, who, this is a Greek name. It just means lover of horses. We see Bartholomew, which is a Hebrew name. It's broken up into Bar, Talmai. Bar is the Aramaic word for son. Talmai means furrows, but it's also the name of a place, which we see in Joshua 15:14. And Caleb drove thence the three sons of Anak, Shishai, and Ahiman, and Talmai, the children of Anak. So the Anakim were giants, and they had a child named Talmai. There's also a person named Talmai in the story of David and Absalom in 2 Samuel 3:3. Speaking of David's sons, his second, Eliab of Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite, and the third, Avshalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. And so this is the name of the Absalom's grandfather on his mother's side. And we see that when he's in trouble, he runs and hides there. Another name which is given and sometimes associated with Bartholomew is the name Nathaniel, Nathanael, which also means given of God. There's not a clear connection between these two characters, but some people believe they're the same person. Next we have Thomas, and in Hebrew, this is a Hebrew word, ta'om, that means twin. We can find it in Genesis 25:24. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins, te'omim, in her womb. We also see that he has a nickname, Didymus, which is the Greek word for twin, so there's no question about it. Matthew is a Hebrew name from Matityahu, which also means gift of God. We can see it in 1 Chronicles 9:31. And Mattityahu, one of the Levites, who was the firstborn of Shallum the Korite, had the set office over the things that were made in the pans. And there's a very famous Mattathias in the story of the Maccabees. In 1 Maccabees 2:1, in those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, the priest of the sons of Yoariv, from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. And here's the Greek text, and you can see his name, Mattathias, there. Again, it's Greek, it ends in S. Matthew, is mentioned in several different forms across the Gospels, but he's the same guy. He's the guy working at the tax booth. His father is named Alphaeus, which is a Hebrew word, chalphai, which comes from the word which means to change. So it's interesting that he's kind of like in a money-changing position. The root is found in a town mentioned in Joshua 19:33, and their coast was from Chelphai, from Alon to Zaananim and Adami, Nekev and Yavniel, unto Lachum, and the outgoings thereof were at Jordan. Chalphai is also mentioned as the father of one of the James, coming later, and he's also mentioned as the father of Levi. Levi ben Chalphai is Matthew, same guy. The name Levi, of course, Levi, is an old, popular Hebrew name for one of the tribes. We see in Mark 2:14. And as he passed by, he saw Levi the son of Alphaeus sitting at the receipt of custom, and said unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. Interesting thing about Matthew is that he's not mentioned at all in the Gospel of John. Next we have this man, Lebbaeus, or also called Thaddeus, possibly coming from Lev, which means heart in Hebrew, and Thaddeus coming from the Aramaic word for breast, which is cognate to the Hebrew word shed, also an idea that he's large-hearted or courageous. Judah, we know, is a common name from the tribes. Yehudah means praise. Next we have mentioned Simon, who has two epithets. One is the Canaanite and the other is the Zealot. How does this happen? I think it happens through the similar sounds in Hebrew. It's pretty clear that all the disciples are, we might say, Jewish. They're not Canaanites. But the word for Canaan in Hebrew is Kna'an, and the word for zeal is Kan'i. So they sound very similar, even though they're not spelled similarly. And I think perhaps there was some kind of mix-up for the person who decided that Simon was a Canaanite. The word for zeal appears in Numbers 25:11. Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the children of Israel, because he was zealous, kan'i, with my zeal, kin'ah, among them, so that I did not consume the children of Israel in my zeal. And finally we have Judas Iscariot. Judah, we know, is with no S. The word Iscariot is presumed to have come from two Hebrew words, Ish, the man of, and Kiryot, which is a word that can mean city. In Numbers 21:28, for there is a fire gone out of Heshbon, a flame from the city, Kiryah, of Sichon. It has consumed Ar of Moab, and the lords of the high places of Arnon. So that is one possibility. That makes good sense. Ish Kiryot, a man of the cities. We see most of the rest of them are fishermen. They don't live in cities. They live on the shores of the Galilee. Makes him different. But it also could be like Ish Sheker. So Ish is still man. Sheker is a Hebrew word that means like lies. We see in Exodus 5:9, let there be more work be laid upon the men, this is Pharaoh speaking, that they may labor therein, and let them not think about sheker, vain words, words that are not true. So it's another good possibility. It suits him. Finally, let's talk about how Yeshua became Jesus. We see in Matthew 1:21, and she shall bring forth the son, and you shall call his name Jesus, as we say, for he shall save his people from their sins. This only makes sense in Hebrew. We have to understand that every name in Hebrew means something, and it's important to the personality of the person who has that name. Yeshua probably is an Aramaic form for Yehoshua. We're going to look at that in a minute. And the root of it means salvation. You shall name him salvation because he's going to save the people from their sins. This sentence only makes sense in Hebrew. But speaking of Joshua, when the Septuagint was translated into Hebrew, the very transliteration, changing from Hebrew alphabet to Greek alphabet for Joshua, Yehoshua, is Isus. It's exactly the same name as the transliteration of Yeshua's name in the New Testament. So this is not some new development. This is something from the 3rd century BC. Joshua is written in Greek, Isus. If we go back to Tyndale, which is one of the earliest English translations, you see that it's spelled I-O-S-U-A, Iosua. So here's a progression through time. The Hebrew has these consonants, Yeshua. The Septuagint for Joshua's name is Isus. When it came into the Latin, it was translated Esu. In the Wycliffe, very early English translation, we do see the use of the J. And then in Luther, specifically, the use of the J. And even in Tyndale, it goes back to the use of the I. So here's a chart tracing the orthographic spelling evolution of both these names. We see Joshua in Hebrew, Yehoshua. In the Septuagint, it's spelled Eusis. In the 4th century Latin Vulgate, Iosua. I don't pronounce Latin. I don't really know how it's pronounced. Also, Wycliffe. Wycliffe does use the J. Joshua. We don't even see the SH coming in until the Geneva Bible in the late 16th century. And then in King James, here's the J, Joshua. Of course, there is no name for Jesus in the Old Testament. There is a noun, Yeshua. It's spelled slightly differently, and it means salvation. But in the New Testament, Greek, it's spelled Isus. In the Vulgate, we saw Isu, Wycliffe, ESVS. There's no U in the Geneva Bible. That's just a matter of typography. And then the King James we see. So the names evolved a bit separately, but we can see the similarities of what's happening in that orthographic, that spelling evolution. Next time we'll dig into the meat of the narrative of Matthew 10. In the meantime, Tasimata Inayim al Hashemayim, keep your eye on the sky, your redemption draweth nigh. Shalom.